So in this video, I'm going to be talking more about free will, which is one of the central themes of my book, Breaking Free from Karma. That notion of free will almost seems to be real, but at the same time, it can be argued that there is no free will. And so this is what causes the paradox, which I've dealt with from the perspective of fate versus free will in my book. So let us, for example, try one small experiment. Can you raise your hand? Obviously, most of you can, unless you have some physical disability. Can you sing out a song or a tune that you love? I'm sure, again, here you will be able to do that, unless you are in an environment where it would be odd to do that. Now, going by this, we can actually say that you have the choice and the will to do whatever you want in any given situation, because it's the most closely felt experience within us. We have this feeling that we can do anything we want, and that is actually what makes our life worthwhile, because if we don't feel we have control about what's going to happen in our life, then we are at the mercy of nature and circumstances to bring us the things, and we are going to be more like a robot. But that is not the case. In our own direct feeling, we have this feeling that we can do whatever we want. But again, let us examine this very closely. Let us say you have planned some things, such as like your New Year resolutions, or you have just planned out something to carry out. Most likely, like your New Year resolutions, you have been many times unsuccessful because there are situations that come your way and there are things that go against your planning. And so that is at an external level. From an internal level, can you control the thoughts that come into your mind? Now, you might say that I can control where I direct my attention to, where I focus, but that's not the question. Like, can you change the kind of thoughts that come into your mind? Do you have a control over that? Obviously, many of us can see that just like how we don't have control over what we would be dreaming tonight, similarly, it is hard to have control, or at least direct control over what kind of thoughts will be coming into your mind. So going by these kind of situations, if you cannot control your thoughts, if you do not have access to how what comes in your own mind, how can you be so sure how you will actually act out in a specific given situation, or how even the circumstances will actually comply with your wishes? So this kind of paradox, on one side there is a very clear-cut feeling that we are the author of our moments of our lives. On another side, there is this paradox that situations are happening and it is not always beyond our control. Like, we can't control how people react to us, or what will happen with nature, or take for example a situation like pandemic that has constrained a lot of people in many ways. So going by those situations, it is very hard to actually say that we have the free will to do whatever we want. So how do we resolve this? So in this book, I've gone through different perspectives, based right from the science to the Indian philosophical schools, because the science actually says that there has been neuroscience studies which actually show that a person's decisions can be detected even before he thinks he's making that decision. So they can actually predict what you will be having when you're faced with a situation like having coffee, tea, or juice. They can actually predict what you will do. Now, in one way, yes. So from an Indian philosophical perspective, this aspect is what is called as vasanas, or more popularly known as samskaras. So this actually works in well if you take into consideration that this aspect of karma is not just something that happens in this life. Like, it is not that what you have done from childhood to now that is going to determine your results, but it's also those tendencies that we carry. And where do these tendencies come from? Obviously, if you look at it, a child has what is called a certain aptitudes to certain things and doesn't have an inclination towards some topics of or some studies. So going by that, there is very clear cut what we call as samskaras or patterns, which is not just genetical, like it is not just things that is in the genes. Of course, there's some influence of that in how a person responds, but that is actually more earned because of the environment and the physical and mental mechanism inherited as the child comes to birth. But the child carries some very unique tendencies which may not even be in their parents. So it is obvious that what every person is working with is these tendencies as well. Outside of the outside circumstances are there that he or she has to battle with, but then there are also inside circumstances. And sometimes we can also say that these inside circumstances determine how the outside circumstances are going to be, or at least how you would respond to these outward circumstances. So the question comes back, are we in control of our life or not? Do we have a case for free will? Or is it that the circumstances and these tendencies, do they determine how our life is going to play out? A very clear-cut answer to this is we obviously have free will. At a relative level, we can actually change circumstances. But yet at the same time, at this relative level, this free will is constrained. It is like, if you tie an airplane, like a toy plane, to a long rope, and then you use whatever electrical things and you let that go, so it can only fly as much as that rope will allow it to flow, to fly. So at the same time, when we look at our situations in life, how much we are in control of our situations and how much it is determined for us is actually dependent a lot on our previous tendencies that we carry and certain circumstances we create in this life. Now that is at a very conditional level, and this is where a lot of spiritual practices help, because they help you to widen this. The successful person is one who is able to widen their range of free will more and more and more. But again, when we look at it from this perspective, it is still going to be having certain amount of restrictions. There will be certain restrictions on how much free will a person can exercise. However, when we come and look at this from a perspective of non-duality, wherein this identification and obsession with this little I is no longer there, where the subject and object collapses. I won't go a lot into this in this video because I will hopefully cover it in another video, and it's also covered quite well in my book in the last chapter. But at this point of understanding free will, we have to know that if we want this unconditional free will, we can get it, but not when we are contained within the source of this identity of this little self. And in order to break that identity, it is not just a yogic practice or something which will expand you and make you a superhuman, but it is actually a certain understanding on what is it that is seeking free will. Because when we understand the sense of self that is actually seeking that free will, then we realize that this self has already attained that free will.